What happens when decades of Texas politics meet the sharpest legal mind in Congress? Today, the clash isn't just about a bill, it's about the very rights that define our freedom. The congressional hearing room felt alive, like a pressure cooker ready to blow. You could almost hear the tension humming in the air, sharp and electric. Cameras clicked, microphones adjusted, staff whispered quietly, but all eyes were on one man, Governor Greg Abbott. He sat at the witness table, wheelchair perfectly centered, projecting the calm confidence of someone who'd navigated decades of Texas politics and thought he'd seen it all. There was a practiced ease in the way he leaned into the microphone, the kind that only comes from countless appearances before Congress. Today, Abbott had a story to tell: the Community Protection Act. A bill he promised would make Texans safer, giving law enforcement the tools they need to protect our communities. His opening statement flowed like clockwork, polished, smooth, and wrapped in that unmistakable Texas swagger. On the surface, it all sounded reassuring, even common sense, but not everyone in the room was buying it. Several seats down, Representative Jasmine Crockett of Dallas watched with the quiet intensity of a trial lawyer ready to pounce. At 42, Crockett had built her reputation on two things: preparation and precision. Every word of this bill had been dissected, cross-referenced with constitutional law, and weighed against real-world consequences. She wasn't here to nod politely or accept political spin. She was here to uncover the truth. While the room buzzed with anticipation, the energy was subtle but undeniable. Journalists straightened in their seats. Camera operators adjusted angles. Staff stopped whispering. Something was about to happen, and everyone felt it. Crockett's pen moved steadily across her notepad, not taking notes, but building a case. And as Abbott began describing a Texas under siege, rising crime, overwhelmed police, fearful communities, it was clear that this hearing would be more than a simple presentation, because today, preparedness meets power, and only one side will control the narrative. How do you sell safety when the price might be our most basic freedoms? Governor Abbott is about to find out, under the watchful eyes of Congress and a lawyer who won't be fooled. The room had settled into a tense rhythm. Abbott's opening lines flowed effortlessly, smooth as silk but with an unmistakable weight behind them. He spoke with the authority of someone who'd spent decades shaping Texas politics. Every word was carefully measured, every pause intentional. "We're giving law enforcement the tools they need to keep our community safe," he declared, voice carrying a blend of Texas swagger and political gravitas. On the surface, it sounded reassuring, almost comforting. Who could argue with public safety? Committee members nodded politely, some glancing at their notes, a few checking their phones discreetly. But in the midst of this polite theater, the air was thick with anticipation. You could feel it. This wasn't going to be a routine hearing. Abbott painted a vivid picture of Texas under siege, crime rising, communities living in fear, police departments stretched to their limits. His proposed solution was simple, at least in his words: expand law enforcement authority, create new categories of prohibited conduct, and equip prosecutors with more tools. He spoke with confidence, like a storyteller recounting a world where he alone had the map. And for a moment, it seemed convincing, the kind of common-sense framing that makes you wonder who could possibly object to keeping people safe. But the camera panned to the other side of the table, where Jasmine Crockett sat, pen in hand, eyes unblinking. Her gaze didn't just watch, it measured, calculated, dissected every claim. Every rhetorical flourish, every smooth phrase was catalogued in her mind. She had spent hours reading the bill line by line, consulting constitutional experts, and reviewing how similar laws had played out in other states, and right now, she was thinking, on the surface, it looks neat. But underneath, the danger is real. Even as Abbott finished his polished pitch, the subtle energy in the room hinted that this hearing was no ordinary presentation. Something was about to snap, and it would change the course of this discussion entirely. Some people prepare for a hearing. Some people prepare to rewrite the rules of the game. Jasmine Crockett doesn't just attend, she arrives ready to dismantle every false argument. Several seats down the long, polished table, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still. Her posture was calm, her pen moving steadily across a notepad, but this was no ordinary note-taking. Every stroke, every mark, was part of a silent strategy, building a case, step by step, to confront decades of political confidence head-on. At 42, Crockett had a reputation that preceded her: sharp, meticulous, unflinching. She wasn't here for political theater or sound bites. She was here to read between the lines, to spot the holes no one else noticed, to challenge spin with evidence, and to protect the rights of everyday Texans who might never see the inside of this room die in the past 72 hours, she had done what she always did before high-stakes hearings: read every word of the proposed legislation. Cross-referenced it with constitutional law, consulted civil liberties experts, gathered real-world examples of how similar laws had been applied and misapplied in other states. As Abbott confidently outlined a Texas under siege, Crockett's eyes didn't blink. She didn't just hear the talking points, she saw the danger lurking behind them. Every exaggerated claim about rising crime, every call to expand law enforcement power, was logged in her mind for careful dismantling. The contrast couldn't have been sharper: Abbott's smooth rhetoric versus Crockett's quiet intensity. One projected authority, the other projected preparedness and purpose. And everyone in the room, journalists, staffers, committee members, sensed it. Something was about to shift. Because Crockett wasn't just listening, she was ready. It sounds reasonable. It even feels reassuring. But what if common sense is just the mask hiding something far more dangerous? Abbott leaned back slightly, letting his words settle over the room. He painted a vivid picture of Texas under siege: rising crime, fearful communities, overwhelmed police departments. He spoke with that practiced authority, making every listener imagine the chaos he claimed was just around the corner. On the surface, it seemed simple. Expand law enforcement powers, create new categories of prohibited conduct, give prosecutors more tools. Common sense, right? Who could possibly argue with safety? But in the quiet corners of the room, Jasmine Crockett's mind was already racing. She had read the bill not just once, but 3 times, and cross-checked it with constitutional law, civil liberties research, and real-world precedents from other states. To her, what Abbott was presenting was not just law and order legislation, it was a carefully packaged threat to fundamental freedoms. She could almost hear the hidden pitfalls behind every phrase: a provision so broad it could make a peaceful protest illegal, another that could criminalize a simple social media post, a clause granting police the power to shut down any gathering deemed potentially disruptive before it even began. Committee members, meanwhile, were nodding politely, lulled by the smooth presentation. Some whispered to aides, others glanced at their phones, but Crockett's gaze never wavered. She didn't just see what Abbott was selling, she saw what lay beneath the talking points, and it was far from harmless. The contrast was striking: Abbott, confident and persuasive, and Crockett, calm, observant, ready to expose the gap between rhetoric and reality. The tension in the room was invisible but palpable, like a quiet storm building before the lightning strikes. In that moment, the illusion of reason hung in the air, delicate yet dangerous, waiting for someone to pull back the veil. And everyone knew Crockett was the one poised to do exactly that. In politics, confidence can be a shield, until someone knows exactly where to aim. The room shifted instantly as the committee chairman cleared his throat. The chair now recognizes Representative Crockett for 5 minutes of questioning. It was subtle, yet electrifying. Cameras adjusted angles. Journalists straightened in their seats. Even the quietest staffers stopped their hushed conversations. Everyone knew Crockett's 5 minutes rarely stayed within 5 minutes, and almost never went the way the witness expected. Crockett leaned forward, adjusting her microphone with deliberate calm. She made eye contact with Abbott before speaking a single word. The silence stretched, palpable, the kind that makes every listener hold their breath. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, her voice clear and steady. "Governor Abbott, I appreciate you taking the time to come before this committee to discuss your Community Protection Act. Before we dive into details, I want to make sure I understand your central argument correctly. You're telling us that this bill is necessary to keep Texans safe, is that accurate?" Abbott nodded, confident, as if the question itself were beneath him. "That's exactly right, Congresswoman. Public safety is my top priority, and this legislation gives our law enforcement the resources and authority they need to protect our communities." Crockett nodded slowly, as if considering his response carefully. "And you've mentioned several times that this is about fighting crime, protecting families, and supporting our police officers, all goals that, I think, everyone here can agree are important, correct?" Abbott's smile widened, a subtle show of agreement. But that smile was a trap. Crockett had led him straight into it. Common ground, she knew, was the perfect starting point to expose hidden flaws. "Common ground is always a good place to start," she said, her tone respectful but edged with intensity. "Still, let's talk about what this bill actually does, Governor. Not the talking points, not the press release version, but what's actually written in the legislation you are asking Congress to federally fund and support. She picked up a thick document, tabs marking critical sections. Section 7 of your Community Protection Act creates a new category of offense called organized disruption. Can you explain to this committee what qualifies as organized disruption under your definition? Abbott shifted slightly, keeping his media-trained smile in place. It's designed to address situations where groups intentionally disrupt public order, block roadways, or interfere with lawful commerce. It's common-sense public safety legislation. Crockett didn't flinch. She flipped to a tabbed page and began reading the actual bill aloud. Organized disruption shall be defined as any gathering of 3 or more persons that creates, or has the potential to create, interference with normal activities, traffic flow, business operations, or public services. She looked up, eyes sharp. Governor, under this definition, couldn't a group of college students protesting tuition increases on a public sidewalk be charged with organized disruption? Couldn't parents gathering outside a school board meeting to voice concerns about their children's education be arrested? Couldn't workers picketing for better wages be prosecuted? The room buzzed with murmurs. Abbott's confident composure wavered. Crockett had just made it clear, this wasn't theory. These were real rights at risk. Words on a page can feel harmless, until someone reads them the way they were meant to be read. Crockett's pen hovered over her notepad, eyes locked on Abbott as she flipped to another tab in the thick, color-coded bill. The air in the room seemed to tighten, as if everyone could sense the weight of what was about to be revealed. Governor, let's go beyond the talking points, she began, calm but firm. Section 7 of your Community Protection Act introduces organized disruption. You've described it as groups interfering with public order, but the language itself says, she read deliberately, letting every word land, any gathering of 3 or more persons that creates, or has the potential to create, interference with normal activities, traffic flow, business operations, or public services. She looked up from the document, eyes steady. Governor, under this definition, peaceful protests, parent meetings, or labor pickets could all be considered criminal activity. Is that really your intent? Abbott's practiced smile faltered. Those are hypothetical scenarios, he said cautiously. They're not hypothetical at all, Governor, Crockett cut in smoothly, her tone sharpened with precision. These are exactly the kinds of protected First Amendment activities that happen every day across Texas and the country. And under your bill, they could be criminal offenses. A murmur rippled through the room. Some committee members were now flipping through their own copies of the legislation, realizing the gravity of what Crockett was pointing out. Abbott attempted to redirect, his voice taking on a slightly patronizing tone. Congresswoman, I think you're misinterpreting the intent. Crockett's eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm, almost surgical. Governor, I'm not interpreting anything. I'm reading your words. Section 9 authorizes law enforcement to disperse any gathering they deem potentially disruptive before any actual disruption occurs. That is prior restraint. The Supreme Court has been clear for decades, the government cannot shut down speech based on what it thinks might happen. Abbott leaned forward, trying to regain control. Representative, with all due respect, public safety sometimes requires. Crockett interrupted, precise and unflinching, public safety doesn't override the Constitution. Yet that is exactly what this bill attempts to do. Every eye in the room was fixed on her. The tension was palpable. Crockett wasn't just pointing out abstract flaws, she was exposing the real-world consequences of legislation disguised as common sense. The air was electric, and for the first time, Abbott's smooth, confident exterior showed cracks. Laws are not just words, they are lived experiences. And for ordinary Americans, this bill could have turned their daily lives into criminal acts. Crockett didn't just stop at the bill's language. She reached for a different set of documents, evidence of what happens when laws like this are enforced in the real world. Her voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of consequence. Governor, let's talk about what happens when legislation like yours becomes reality, she began. We don't have to imagine. We've seen it before. She outlined chilling examples. Oklahoma, grandmothers arrested for gathering outside their statehouse to oppose education budget cuts. Of Florida, environmental activists charged with felonies for organizing a beach cleanup with signs about climate change. Iowa, disability rights advocates prosecuted for blocking access to a senator's office while protesting healthcare cuts. Each example landed like a blow. Abbott's confident posture stiffened. This wasn't theoretical anymore, these were ordinary Americans, caught in the machinery of laws meant to control, not protect. And here's what concerns me the most, Crockett continued, her voice rising just enough to command attention. Section 12 of your bill creates civil liability for anyone providing material support to activities that result in arrests. That means, if a church hands out water to protesters on a hot day, they could be sued. If a local business lets activists use their bathroom, they can be penalized. Even lawyers providing free legal advice could face punishment. The room went silent for a heartbeat. Journalists clicked their pens, camera operators leaned forward, and even some Republican members exchanged uneasy glances. Abbott's carefully maintained composure was cracking. Crockett leaned slightly forward, eyes locked on him. Governor, your bill doesn't just criminalize protest. It tries to strip communities of their ability to support each other in exercising their constitutional rights. This isn't public safety, it's authoritarianism. The word hung in the room like thunder, and for the first time, the full gravity of the hearing hit everyone present. The energy was intense, electric, and undeniable. Abbott was on the defensive. The narrative he had carefully crafted was unraveling in real time. One document, one lawmaker, one unwavering commitment to the Constitution. Sometimes, that's all it takes to stop a dangerous law in its tracks. Crockett held up her copy of the Constitution, a quiet but powerful gesture. The room's chaos seemed to pause as everyone's attention snapped to her. Governor Abbott, she said, her voice cutting through the tension, the First Amendment doesn't say Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech unless someone in power decides it's disruptive. It doesn't say the right to peacefully assemble shall not be infringed unless a governor believes public safety requires it. It says these rights shall not be abridged. Period. She pointed directly at the bill in front of Abbott. This legislation abridges those rights on every page. You came before this committee hoping nobody would read what you wrote. Well, Governor, I read it. My staff read it. Constitutional scholars read it. And we all came to the same conclusion: this bill is dangerous. It is unconstitutional. And it has no place in a free society. Abbott tried to regain control. Representative, if you would just let me explain the full context. The context, Governor, Crockett interrupted firmly, is that you're asking for federal funding to support a state law that criminalizes constitutional rights. And this committee would fail in its duty if we gave you a single dollar for that purpose. Her motion was precise, tabling any consideration of federal support for Texas Community Protection Act pending a full constitutional review by the Congressional Research Service. Several Democrats seconded immediately. Even the committee chairman, caught off guard by the dramatic turn, paused to consider the motion. As the hearing continued, Abbott's attempt to frame the bill as common-sense public safety legislation had already been demolished. Within hours, clips of Crockett's questioning went viral. Social media lit up, news outlets buzzed, and legal analysts weighed in. Former Attorney General Eric Holder tweeted praise, calling it a clinic in constitutional law and effective oversight. Even conservative legal scholars who had initially supported the bill expressed concern. One prominent professor admitted, the prior restraint issues alone are constitutionally problematic. By evening, Abbott's office released a defensive statement claiming mischaracterization, but the political damage was done. 3 days later, the Congressional Research Service confirmed multiple sections of the bill raised serious First Amendment concerns and would likely face immediate constitutional challenges. 2 weeks later, Abbott quietly announced revisions, effectively signaling the bill's death. For Crockett, this hearing became a defining moment in her rising national profile. But her focus remained steady and grounded. At a Texas town hall, she said simply, "I didn't go after Governor Abbott personally. I went after a bill that would have turned constitutional rights into criminal offenses. That's my job: read the legislation carefully, understand its real-world impact, and speak up when freedoms are at stake." A grandmother in the audience, eyes brimming with tears, captured the moment perfectly. Thank you for reading those bills so carefully. Thank you for understanding what they really mean for people like me. It was more than a political victory. It was a defense of American democracy, a testament to the power of careful preparation, courage, and commitment to constitutional principles.